Ladies and gents, welcome back to another podcast. Today, we've got Pavel, and Pavel's CTO of a company called Nate, who are doing some awesome things in the payment and shopping experience world. So today, Pavel's going to give us a little bit of a backdrop to the last 4 years with the business, what it actually means to be CTO of the business, and AI when it comes to shopping experiences and all the fun things and challenges around that. Pavel, how are we?
Yeah, hi. Hi, I'm all right, thanks.
Good.
Nice to be here.
Lovely to be here as well. And tell us a little bit about Nate then, for all the listeners listening. Tell us a little bit about who Nate are and what's the vision of the business.
Yeah. Nate is a customer payment business, doing things like listing, gifting, purchases, and with any payment method on the web. So essentially, as a user, you choose an item, you share it with Nate, and you don't need to do the mundane task of the checkout. So you don't care about filling the forms of shipping, billings, adding to cards, and so on. Additionally, there's also some features like buy now pay later, for example. You don't need to pay upfront. You can split it into 4 installments. You gain some security. Your card is not really exposed to the merchant because we issue single VCN cards. That's kind of it. That's the main promise: saving users time and allowing this universal experience of shopping with any payment method.
Nice. But before we get a little bit more into features of the product, where you're live, I need this, by the way. I'm going to jump on it as soon as it's possible. But tell us a little bit about the last 4 years and, if you like, inception of Nate, your journey over the last 4 years with the business. What's that been like?
Oh yeah, it's been it's been a journey. As a company, we shifted, we scoped a couple of times. It started as a B2B focus product. Then after like a year, we did a hard switch into B2C, and we launched a B2C app in the US as a soft launch with a waiting list, essentially focusing on the consumers instead of partnerships. Yeah. And now we're bringing partnerships back as well. So there were a few changes. My journey was quite a bumpy one. I mean, not in a bad way, but I transitioned from software engineer to being like a tech lead and managing people. I did manage some teams in the past, but it was very small, not like 17, 18 engineers. And then eventually I became the CTO, which is like more high level abstract vision in terms of architecture and the technical direction. So I'm learning every day. Like still, even today, if you ask me what is my job, I can't really define it because I'm still jumping around and fixing small things or advising or giving context to people within the system architecture or on the technical side. But it's in progress. Like same as like systems that are never done. It's always evolving. It's always reshaping. That's how I feel. So
there's a bit of a personal and professional evolution, isn't there? Really, business change scope a year in. I want to try and uncover that a little bit more, but I think on a professional side as well, I think credit to you. It's nice to see that rise throughout a business, especially fast-growing businesses where you get that opportunity. You've shown the ability you can do that.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of it involves a lot of context switching. It involves a lot of process building and release of control. Like being one of the first engineers when I joined, it was a couple of guys, 3 guys. The CEO, Albert, Lucas, chief of science, and another data scientist.
Yeah.
And you're building the system from ground up, from a very small project that essentially becomes like a distributed cloud architecture. And when you grow in your role, you always need to like release the parts that you own. You need to trust people. And sometimes it's hard because you're attached to it emotionally, but it's unavoidable. Like you can't be involved in every single thing. Micromanagement is not the solution.
If you were to go back, what would you do differently, and why?
It's really easy. It's really easy to say it now because you know the problems. You've seen the problems. You experience the pain. But I would architect the solution differently if I knew where Nate would have been in 3 years, of course. But at the time, it wasn't feasible. So it's easy to say, but I would include more, for example, event-driven communication instead of direct API calls. That would be one of the.
I can imagine the business logic probably changed from the switch of scope from B2B and partnerships to B2C, which probably required a different architecture or different technical decisions. That's quite an interesting touch point, as in what made you switch from B2B to B2C?
As a company, there was just a huge interest in the B2C. At the time, there was a lot of press going in terms of Google Assistant automation. When Google Assistant was booking tickets and cars, actually, I'm not sure what happened to it. I think that was one of the drives to go into B2C. The B2B was always there. It just was a bit deprioritized in terms of development feature-wise, but we still had B2B partners along the way. So it's not like we completely left the B2B aside. B2B was always there. It was just on the very small fire cooking. Now it's cooking more. Now we have,
Talk to us a little bit about the features then that you offer in a B2C capacity. You know, we've spoken about one-click checkouts, buy now, pay later, other things. It'd be good to hear you uncover them and what's been added to Nate.
The core functionality that was always there, both in B2B and B2C, is the purchase itself. Without that, it's there is no Nate. So that was the main feature, the first feature of submitting purchases with settings. Well, by settings, I mean options of the product, like color size, something, I don't know. So the purchase was always there. Then we start, we introduced lists as a feature in order to enable more interactions for users and make it more sociable system, because you can add wish lists to lists, you can share lists, people can follow lists. It creates this ecosystem of personal recommendations, which is quite different from like what Amazon does, right? It gives you recommendations based on algorithms that analyze similar patterns and so on. Net is very personal focused. And then after lists, we added gifts, which is also a really cool feature. You can send someone a gift, and then if you accept the gift, you pay for it, but it's cheap to your friend, which is really nice for like Thanksgiving and Christmas time, the sort of gifts. What else? But buy now pay later was a feature we introduced around a year ago. That was kind of fun one because at the time we didn't have a lot of engineers, and we went with internal implementation of it. So we didn't use third-party provider. There's a lot of edge cases with buy now pay later and payments. That was a big effort.
Yeah,
sure.
I can imagine that one, and it's quite a competitive space as well, right?
It is.
We're talking about the US here. I don't know too much about the US buy now pay later landscape, but especially here in the EU, it's a big market that I think companies have capitalized on. And you said there was quite a lot of edge cases there. Just touch on some of the challenges that were centered around buy now, pay later, and what a day-to-day might have looked like solving problems.
Yeah. So in terms of competition, it's not that we're competing with anyone because it's our internal product that we use.
True.
And it actually gives us a lot of visibility internally. For example, if we assess user risk scores, we have all the information inside. We don't send anything to a third party.
Okay.
Edge cases in terms of operator, payments can go in different states. It can be completed successfully. It can be reversed. It can be partially completed. There's a lot of things that needs to be accountable. And then if you split it into 4 installments, you basically multiply the surface by 4. So a lot of
makes
both
sense.
Automated processes.
Yeah. As a business, do you need to be capital intensive to be able to do that and take ownership for the payment?
Yeah, you do. It's quite easy when you have a small audience of users, but when the user audience growing, you do.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's kind of where we are at the middle of the hockey stick. We just like going.
Yeah, nice, good. Let's keep going. Whereabouts you live? Where can people use Nate?
Nate is enabled in the US App Store. So anywhere in the US you can download and you can use it.
Nice.
I'm in the UK. I can't really use it, although I have like test builds. But I'm using it for creating my own list for books, for example, to keep track of what books I'm reading, what books I'm sharing as recommendations with others. But there's like different use cases.
Nice. Okay. Well, you touched on quite an interesting point at the start of the pod around you'd have probably done something in a different design. Or I think it was event-driven architectures instead of your standard API calls. It would be interesting to understand a little bit around the technical landscape, and you seem quite reflective in terms of what you've got already, and help us understand what you've built and why you've built it a certain way. So I know you can break down some of these different domains for us into consumer, automation, partnership. So do you want to start by just uncovering some of those parts for us?
The parts that related to event-driven or in the domain itself?
Good point. Let's separate those two. The event-driven parts and then those domains themselves.
Event-driven, it's just a nice way to create a very scalable and robust and fault-tolerant system. At the time when we built it, the pace was so fast that we didn't really took a step back and thought about how the system will evolve in the future. But we also didn't know how will it be. So we did the thing that we knew. We either throw everything in one monolith and then eventually decompose it into smaller services, but still the services were really coupled. So when you deploy, you had to deploy more than one service, and you had to deploy them in the right order to not create breaking changes and so on. One place that event-driven is shining now in our mind is decoupling of this domain. So domains, the communication between consumer and automation.
Okay.
Like defining the contract between the subsystem and creating them completely decoupled. That looks like really good. We did start already doing things in that domain, but in the domain of decoupling domains. But it's like it's a long-term project. And then every time when there's new service, you also need to take into account, and that's why we created the platform team that will create these tools to enable this technical transformation.
Good answer. Technical transformation's underway. You've spoken about decoupling some of those different domains. Break those down for us and talk to us a little bit about what they actually do for Nate as a business.
So I mentioned already the consumer domain and automation focusing on the checkout, consumer, everything supporting consumer services and the clients. But inside consumer, you also have another separation. Currently, we have a team focusing on pre-purchase, so anything social that happens before someone purchasing an item. Team that focusing on the purchase, which is the actual execution in terms of payments and installments and so on, and post-purchase, which is what happens after. But that's like a recent change. Before that, we had a separation in terms of consumer and payments, so like a team focusing on payment stuff and consumer on the consumer social stuff. So yeah, like because the product is constantly evolving, one of the challenges that you have is how do you evolve and adapt the system? You can't just like reshuffle it every month. And Eventdriven creates this possibility of observable events that's happening in the system that you can also look historically and see what happened before.
Nice. Okay. There's also quite an interesting part in there. I can imagine this might come as AI is an element to you as a business as well. Consumer habits and how people are shopping is probably massively valuable on that consumer part that's connected to your automation domain as well, and probably quite valuable for partnerships. There's some interesting technical transformation part that you're particularly keen to talk about in regards to migration to Kubernetes as well. So you've spoken about some of these event-driven architectures. Help us understand some of the challenges or even the thought process around what that looks like migrating to Kubernetes. That would be quite cool to understand.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the Kubernetes is it's an interesting topic.
I saw you set up with a smile there. So
yeah. I personally enjoy working with it, and I think it was one of the best decisions that we made. But okay, so starting from the start of how Kubernetes got into our system, it was quite early. It was about almost 2.5 years when we started thinking about it, because our very first services, and some of them still running as like a legacy system, they were launched on Elastic Beanstalk, and it worked fine. But we wanted to have something that is more observable for the development experience, especially, and also for the operation side, DevOps.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of concern because Kubernetes is a beast. There's a lot of configurations. Although it's like a managed service, for example, we use AWS EKS, but still there's a lot of concept that needs to be understood, and the learning curve is not really easy. So what we did, we use our PGF days. Every Friday we have a personal growth Friday, and we did Kubernetes sessions, me and one of the DevOps guys at the time, for about still 7 or 8 months. And we just created this confidence in the engineering team, and tooling and confidence and like concept explanation that essentially just naturally was adopted. There was no fear of like, how am I facing it? Because everything, basically it was explained. So after about like 6-7 months, we actually introduced it into production, and it's running today, and it's great. It allowed us a lot of things, but
no, go on. I was going to ask a question in there. What's it allowed? What's it allowed you to do? What's it leveraged within the business? Then I'll ask a couple of my questions.
Yeah, it's okay. One thing that was really nice about it is also linked to development experience, because Kubernetes creates this platform that is detached from the cloud provider. So you can run essentially testing environments locally. You can experiment fast. You can easily, using tool like telepresence, for example, you can develop locally as if you are in the cluster.
Yeah.
So it introduced a lot of tooling that we could have found them. But for example, even things like API gateways, when we explored solutions, it was quite a lot of maintenance and configurations.
Yeah.
And with Kubernetes, we could just use traffic, which is great. Like it's highly configurable, scalable. It works out of the box.
Yeah. When coaching, that's a really interesting engineering culture aspect, I think, to you that you're quite proud of and good for you around PGF. But when learning with your peer for 6-7 months and trying to coach that back to the team, in moments like that, are there friction points, not necessarily individually with Nate, but are there friction points in teams where people are looking at individual use cases and spotting things that might not work? How do those conversations typically pan out?
It's the only thing I can say it's like magically resolved because we actually embrace these conversations.
Okay.
There's no leveling or hierarchy in terms of seniority, and any engineer can speak his mind. And if someone finds something that actually makes the solution not feasible, then it's great. One of the core values that we have in Nate is disagreement is healthy. So we encourage to disagree and challenge the decisions. And it's okay. Like if we made the decision to move to Kubernetes, but then it's actually not a good solution, why would we go for it? So it's all about discussions. Obviously, everyone has its own opinions, experience. But in the end, for example, me as CTO, I don't feel like even a decision maker. I'm just making whatever makes sense. We take an idea, we explore it, we do a POC, we see if it's workable, and we move on.
The business has obviously matured technically, and practices and processes need to come with that as well. Seemingly that they are being done. What else are you proud of that you've introduced in the way of practices or mindset that are at Nate now?
So I mentioned forgiveness over permission principle, and I think it's one of the core. Sorry, I was talking about disagreement is healthy. Okay, so two things, two values that actually all of the values, like we have 5 values at Nate. We have self-care isn't selfish, which means that you should not compromise your health over being productive or delivering work. You need to take care of yourself. The other value is make true promises. So if you promise something, you need to actually deliver it. And it's okay if there's always like unforeseen circumstances. So if you promise something, but there's something came up, it's okay to delay it as long as you communicate it, but you do need to do whatever you promised. The third one is always look forwards. So if you screw up something, we don't grill about why did you do it. We analyze the situation. So for example, if there is an incident in production, we make a postmortem. We talk about what went wrong, and we think about how can we improve it instead of thinking about why it went wrong. And the fourth, and there's two more.
Carry on.
Should I go?
Yeah, carry on.
The fourth one is forgiveness over permission, meaning that if you need to do something, you shouldn't let any process that stands in your way to disrupt your productivity. So for example, if you're an engineer and you need to fix something in production, you don't need to wait for approval from your manager before you do it. You just need to go and do it if it's the right thing. And it links nicely with always look forward, because if you took this initiative and you screwed up, it's also fine because you just move on.
I think the values are really important. Sorry if I'm jumping in, but values are massively important, especially in businesses, engineering environments. You need values, principles that everyone knows that they can live by, that they are essentially the lines on your football pitch, so to speak. They are the lines or the bounds within where you need to work and what you need to do, and everything within that is down to you, and it's quite autonomous. But I do believe in that, or those boundaries, if you like.
Yeah, I 100% agree. All these values, they're not really technically driven, but they're company-wide values, but they boils down into our engineering philosophy as well, because it's like, in the end of the day, whoever does the tech is human beings that work in the company.
Yeah.
But there's another one, another value, disagreement is healthy, that I mentioned. So to your question about how did we resolve, or how the engineering culture evolved, it was a combination of all these principles. And because we kept to actually emphasizing them, it just evolved as a nice place to work.
Yeah.
And disagree and argue and come to solutions.
Yeah, you have to. And I think that's quite, it's typical of most workplaces, but engineering environments, you will have different ideas, different problem-solving capabilities that naturally create a disagreement or two different ways of thinking, conversations, whatever that might be. No, I was going to say on the engineering side of the business, there's some maturation there, as in you have started to mature. You've started to think about doing things differently when it's come to migrating to Kubernetes, thinking about your system, moving away from this monolith. There are some other things around devs looking after operational health of what they build, and why is that mindset introduced, and there's tests and pipelines. Uncover some of those parts for us and introduce the whys to some of those. That would be good to know.
One technical aspect, or like technical mindset that we kind of shifted in the past year and a half is giving the development teams, the Scrum teams, which are like cross-functional. So we have a team of front-end engineers, back-end engineers, product manager, QA. Yeah. So the shift was to giving them the responsibility for the deployments, the infrastructure management, the monitoring, basically owning the whole process from the beginning till the end. And technically, it was done by removing infrastructure as code made in Terraform in DevOps repository into decomposing it into like smaller repository for each team. And same with like Kubernetes. When we started doing it, we realized that there's a lot of questioning from the engineering side. How am I going to manage it if I'm not the DevOps side? So we did this internal upscaling when we explained how Terraform works. Some people did hierarchical certification, but in the end, it created these smaller teams that are responsible for everything, and they understand also what's going on end to end, and they just self-contain. They don't need this help from the platform team 24/7. And we can also see it if you analyze the incidents in the production and on the call, and how if something happens, if engineering team is fixing, or that there is a platform guy comes to help them. So you can see like the dependency be getting less and less. And also the engineers themselves are quite happy because it's a new technology, it's a new tool, it's a new skill. So it's like a win-win,
Going back to your initial point, was that natural or deliberate? That might be my oversight. Was that a deliberate in terms of people had to start understanding infrastructure as code and Terraform?
You had to start, Like we did it. It wasn't like imposed. Like everybody now is doing Terraform. Please go and deploy it, because obviously that wouldn't work. We started with a smaller team, and we did an experiment for I don't remember, a month or two, and we saw that they actually operationally okay with it. And then the knowledge just spread, because once you bring it into the engineering repositories, they will be curious. They will look into it. They will look into CI/CD pipelines. They will look into scripts, and naturally the knowledge will spread.
Yeah. Help us understand the CD pipeline stuff as well, because I touched on that as in you've now got a real big focus on tests, CD pipelines. Touch on that as we're on the subject and where that shift came from.
Yeah. One of the big changes that we're currently doing still is trunk-based development. So instead of having, we still have dev environment, staging environment, and production environment, but instead of having each branch, like development branch, staging branch, and master branch, we have one main branch, and it deploys to, let's say, dev stage, and it runs acceptance tests. And if acceptance tests are passed, it deploys to staging. Staging can do acceptance tests or load tests, and eventually it will go into production. And it started because we wanted to reduce the time to production. There was a lot of time spent both on the version control management, like conflicts in the branches, because the team grew and everybody's working on the same code base. Until you decompose these code base into smaller ones, it will take time. And also introducing more and more automation tests gives more and more stability and just trusting the process that if you deploy stuff, it will work as it's expected, because acceptance tests are also driven by the product. So it's not development, the developers, like backend engineers, deciding how they're going to do acceptance tests. When the feature is designed, it's supported by acceptance tests from a business perspective. So yeah, just creating more confidence and speeding up deployments, time to production from dev to product. Yeah.
Nice. Deliberate or natural again?
It started deliberately. So it actually started, it didn't came from like the top management. It came from the engineers that were working on one of the projects, and they were really frustrated with the time they're spending not being productive. So they said, why don't we do Trunkbase? And again, we did like a POC. We saw that we can do it, and we roll it out. And now it's going. I think we have, I would say 20% of the services converted to Trunkbase. Still have a lot of work to do, but it did show increasing stability and confidence.
Yeah, I think especially in engineering teams as well, it is important to allow engineers to be autonomous and give them control over decisions as to how they want to work or how they want to build something or ship to production. Yeah. I think that's key, and that probably plays to, again, a company value that you've got, right?
Yeah. For example, recently, two backend engineers from different teams, they paired on the PGF to introduce DORA metrics, which is something that constantly monitors how your code is deployed and how much time do you spend like install branches and so on. And I mean, I heard about it, but I never worked in an environment that had it integrated. And when I look at it, I was amazed. I wished I was an engineer that worked in this kind of system that gives you observability of all whatever we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, like inspiring this innovation and testing and rapid prototyping, it's a great benefit. Obviously, there's a challenge of keeping things like stable. That's why we have a platform team. But so far it worked well. But as you scale, more and more people coming in, more and more teams, it might diverge, and you don't want that. You want to have a consistent way across the system.
That's true. It seems as if you've got some really core values that drive how you work and interact with yourselves. It seems as if you're moving in the right direction from a technical standpoint. Where do you think Nate want to be or will be in regards to the product? As in, what's next? What's coming?
What's coming? One thing that I can say, there was an announcement about integrating with crypto payments. So that would be a big one. We don't know yet when and how it will happen. We need to scope it out. But the idea is that we will enable to pay with any payment that you want: credit cards, debit cards, buy now pay later stuff, bank accounts, and now crypto. Basically, it covers almost all the possibilities.
Wow.
And
that's big.
And additionally, there's that's one thing. Additionally, there's a partnership for product, which is an offering to B2B publishers to integrate with Nate. So it will be like a web integration SDK. Let's say you publish an article and you have a link to a product. If you have a Nate account, you can buy with Nate, or you create a Nate account on the website and buy it from there. So it's not limited only to iOS ecosystem anymore.
Nice. Okay. That's some good stuff. It would be nice to see you guys at some point. I don't know if this is on the roadmap, and I'm not looking for any spoilers either, but at some point in UK or Europe.
Yeah, that will be really cool. It is constantly in our mindset, but we need to do some groundwork first, preparation on the infrastructure, and it will come.
Good. Listen, key things that we always finish off with, as well as there's obviously some interesting engineering challenges. It's a forward-thinking engineering environment that's autonomous. There's going to be some big pluses when it comes to potentially working at Nate, like we've mentioned. Help listeners understand a little bit around what you're looking for, or if you're hiring people and what you're looking for. So people can come and check you guys and girls out and see what you're up to or speak to you. Yeah.
Our interview process consists of 4 stages. One is a screen phone with our in-house recruiter, then a screen phone with the direct manager for the team that you're interviewing to. Then it depends on the candidate. The candidate can choose either to take a home challenge or a face-to-face technical interview. If you take the home challenge, some people just prefer it to spend more time to make it more nice as a project, and some people don't have time for that, and they prefer to just come face-to-face. And then the 4th is the cultural interview. So you're interviewing with someone who's not necessarily a technical guy. So what we're looking for is just problem solvers. Our interviews are kind of language agnostic. Some teams will be like more focused on Node.js, some teams will be focused on Python, some teams will be focusing on Go. But the questions are more general. In terms of giving you a situation and how would you respond to it in terms of soft skill or communication skills or architectural decisions or finding a bottleneck. But none of the interviews is exactly the same. We don't have like a template that this is the template how we interview. It really depends on the interviewee. Some people who are really experienced, they will get much harsher interview than junior guys. But it's
a random system design interview.
No, it's not. There's like general guidance and general ideas, but we have a lot of questions, and the questions can be mutated depending on the situation.
Nice. Okay.
But generally, we're looking for good engineers. Doesn't matter where you're coming from, with problem-solving skills and willing to learn new technology. Because it doesn't matter where you're coming from. There's always be something new. We might use some tooling that you didn't use in the past.
UK based.
UK based and US based. We have also an engineering function in the US.
Okay. Yeah. If you're listening, ladies and gents, we've got some followers in the US that listen to us on a regular basis. It still shocks me, honestly. We've got a large contingent of people in the UK. So check the guys and girls out at Nate. Obviously, if you're US based, have a look on the App Store. and see a little bit about what these guys and girls are doing. Download them, try and use them. But UK based, check out Pavel, check out some of the other guys and girls, and I'm sharing some links below for you to see a little bit about what they're about. Have a look at their website. But I think we've covered off some really nice areas around what the business does, what they're building, and how autonomous some of their teams are and some of their engineering challenges. So check them out. Pavel, I want to say a big thanks. Thanks for coming to talk to us and share your 4 years. You got excited with the migration to Kubernetes, which is good to see. So if you want a smiley CTO who oversees some of this tech stuff, come and talk to the guys and girls.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure, Pavel. And always remember, like, share, subscribe, show your friends importantly, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no_. We've also got a website, which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.